Hi everyone, thank you so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. If you are standing in the back, this is all seating right next to me. Feel free to get close and whatnot. We want you to do that. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Car Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple, and tonight I'm very excited to welcome Jon Hickey as we celebrate. This is the launch of Big Chief. Jon is joined tonight by author Zach Williams. Let's give a hand for Zach as well. The book is out today.
Yes, it is.
It's a book's birthday, which is very exciting. I'm so glad that you are all here to celebrate with us. This is we've been looking forward to it, so I'm glad that you are all here. Thank you for joining us in person and also online. Hello, online audience, and wave at your camera if you cannot see. We are broadcasting from San Francisco. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement, and so at this time I would like to let you know that we are operating on unceded Ramaytush land. We think that acknowledgement requires action, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. We have details about the Ramaytush Land Trust at the back desk if you are interested in how to participate in this project of rematriation. I have very brief business before I let these two take over. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. I've been told that picture taking is okay, so please feel free to take pictures. You can tag us. You can tag us at Books on the Park. But the only rule is that you cannot take unflattering photos of our authors. Don't do it. Especially don't tag them in it. That is not cool. So folks who are just arriving, all of this next to me is open seating, and also these purple stairs on my left is all seating as well. So yes, no unflattering photos, that is a rule. But I mention all of this to say, please don't take a call in the middle of the event. Please, or if you need to, please step outside and don't keep sitting in the audience. Please check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event you are currently attending. I will plug now that Saturday, April 26th is Independent Bookstore Day. It's our biggest day of the year. We do a lot for it. We have free books, we have mimosas, we have other stuff I will tell you about at a later date when I am more prepared. I am woefully behind in planning, but it is always fun, and we always have free books, so that I can guarantee you. Saturday, April 26th. And please do buy books if you are able. We have two authors with fabulous books this evening. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. And I think they'll sign them. Yeah. If you're like polite about it, they will sign them. You gotta be super cool, and we won't even charge you extra. How great is that? I'm just joking. So yes, we always appreciate it. Thank you so much. It helps us put on events like these if you are able to purchase books. Without further ado, actually, hold on. Before I introduce the two authors who are joining us tonight, I would just like to make mention that being able to celebrate local authors is one of my favorite things to do, and Jon has been a really exemplary literary citizen in the past couple of years that he has been around, that I have been in community with him, and he has been to so many other author events in our store alone, and it's so nice to be able to finally celebrate his work this evening, and I'm really glad that you are all here to do so too. So yay, Jon. And thank you to Zach, whose book we also got to launch last year too. It's just, I freaking love the Bay Area and all of the very talented people who are here, and I'm very lucky to be in this room with all of you. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two writers who are joining us tonight. First, Zach Williams is a Jones Lecturer in Fiction at Stanford University, where he previously held a Wallace Stegner Fellowship. His work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, and McSweeney's Quarterly Concern. His story Trial Run was one of three that won the Paris Review 2023 ASME Award for Fiction. Originally from Wilmington, Delaware, he currently resides with his family in San Francisco, and his debut collection, Beautiful Days, was released last year from Doubleday. Let's give one more hand for Zach Williams. And last but most certainly not least, Jon Hickey earned his MFA at Cornell University and was a Stegner Fellow at Stanford. He's received scholarships from the Bread Loaf Writers Conference and the Suwannee Writers Conference, and he is an enrolled member of the Lac du Flambeau Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. His short fiction has appeared in the Massachusetts View, Gulf Coast Online, Meridian, and other places. Jon lives in San Francisco with his wife and 2 sons, and his debut novel, Big Chief, is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more hand for Jon.
Thank you, everybody. As Carr said, I've been to a lot of events here, and it's very strange to be sitting right here. And it's also kind of a nightmare because it's all the people from all parts of my life all together at once. And but not like a nightmare. It's really, really nice. So I thought I'd start out by reading a little bit and then get into some questions. And yeah. I'm going to read from the first part of the book, very early part. On the morning of Thanksgiving, or rather feast day, because Mac decided Passage Rouge would not honor the colonialist origins of the holiday. Mac is the tribal president, by the way. I just wanted to make sure we knew that. The people of our mid-sized reservation line up along Peace Pipe Road, the main drag in town. They're in good spirits because we're handing out the annual per capita checks, 2 Gs, double the usual amount, thanks to our last-minute raid on the general fund. Credit cards and overdue rents are about to be paid off, used cars and Christmas gifts are about to be bought, and on top of this, the first 50 tribal citizens in line get a free meal and a $20 casino voucher for a couple of spins inside. Are we buying votes or delivering on promises? Well, that depends on whose camp you're in. I watch our constituents from the window of the Migazi suite on the top floor of the 4-story hotel, and Max sees them too, a wary, contemptuous look, clouding the usual ursine friendliness of his face. He's going down there to dole out meals, hand out per capita checks, and remind them that in a week they're going to vote and they better make the right choice, although it's possible, even probable, that these same people will vote for Gloria Hawkins, which has the president feeling morose this morning. He hasn't said a word to me since I've come up to the suite, so he's startled when he croaks, where the hell's Bobby Lone Eagle? He's referring to our chief of police who's fetching the president's ride, the big chief from the car wash in town. He's on his way. Wasn't going to make you walk your ass over there. I just don't want to be waiting for him at the valet stand with my hands in my pockets. Wouldn't be a good look, right, cuz? We're not really cousins in the literal sense. We are not related. Cuz is a name to keep me close, and to make me feel like we're bound together by something other than our jobs, our office, our ambitions. We are family in our deeds, our conspiracy, and maybe it's his way of reminding me that if we're going down, we're going together. I grunt in the affirmative and gently prod him over towards the door to keep him moving. On our way out, he stops to check himself in the full-length mirror at the door, smooth down the whiskers, tug the front of his ribbon shirt to get it to drape just right. We get into the elevator, his breath whistling through the hairs in his nose. He's white-knuckling a hangover, but when the elevator doors open up to the Golden Eagles gaming floor, he has willed himself sober, wearing a dreamy half-smile. There's a word for him, and that word is massive. He is a solid mass. Growing up, he was tall and skinny, but now he is tall and massive. Not fat, not muscular, just massive. And covering this mass like a tarp is a satin shirt trimmed with blue and red ribbon, embroidered with flowers and vines. A beadwork Thunderbird medallion as big as a teacup saucer dances a soft two-step along his massive chest as he walks through the casino. A flat-brimmed Washington Nationals hat sits on his head just a little off-center, and underneath, his hair is woven into a tight, long braid that lands in the middle of his massive back. It doesn't matter what they say about him in private, all the sniping, all the whispers. The gold uniform dealers and pit bosses stand at attention when they see him, and he nods at them as they tend to the 24-hour churn of cards and chips. He can relax here. He can be himself. He lives upstairs. His gravitational weight pulls me along with him into the casino. Bobby Lone Eagle, the chief of police, and let's not forget, because I haven't, one of my childhood tormentors, intercepts us at the mouth of the double row of blackjack tables in the grand atrium. Mac gives him a fist bump, and Bobby falls in with us, and we set out for the golden doors that lead to the valet stand. That's where our former tribal president and current shadow advisor Buzz Carlisle waits for us, making a big show of tapping the face of his Rolex to remind us that Indian time ain't going to cut it today. Our people are waiting in the cold for their checks. We see him, but that doesn't make Mac walk any faster. We may have been good sports and kept him on as a consultant to preserve institutional knowledge, all that. No sense throwing out the pilot after hijacking the plane, right? But he sure as hell acts like he's still the boss. I guess after you've been tribal president for 2 decades, it's hard to let go of that power. Get your asses in gear, he's saying. He needs to teach us kids a few things like the importance of punctuality, but we're fast learners, aren't we? For instance, we learned in the last go-around that if you want to be chief and your name isn't Arno or Coda, you put on your piously traditional Indian persona and get your ass in front of the electorate and speak with a serious and measured tone about the need to go back to the old traditional ways, to rediscover the language of our ancestors, to build our nation, to provide for the next 7 generations of ancestors to come. You shake some hands and you learn some names and you make it rain for the right people at the right time. And this work doesn't happen on the gaming floor. Sure, on this feast day morning, there's no drought of gamblers leashed to their 9-line machines with their loyalty cards tracking their compulsions, inhaling Newports and exhaling gossip between slot spins. These are not our voters. The people most likely to actually vote await us outside the doors of the William R. Paulson Tribal Government Center, cold and hungry for their checks and free meals, which will be handed to them by their tribal president. I may run the operation, but I'm meant to be invisible, to blend in. Mac, however, must dominate the room, and watching him never fails to fill my ears with that pleasing electric hum, the low-frequency rumble of power. Our grip on that power is shaky now, but we aren't quite dead yet. Furtive glances shoot through our bones like gamma radiation as we parade across the gaming floor. He smiles at people who recognize him, his head tucked down in rehearsed humility. He is a head taller than anyone else, which is probably not true, but feels true. Hands come out of nowhere and reach up and slap him on the shoulder. He turns his head slightly to acknowledge them. We walk down that double row of blackjack tables underneath the ornate dome, its rim decorated with the silhouettes of our Anishinaabe ancestors and Shimokamanab traders meeting together in brotherhood to sign the Treaty of La Pointe. And when one of those silhouettes moves, I realize I'm looking at a janitor with a vacuum cleaner strapped to his back. I know him. We paid for his mother's wheelchair ramp because we look out for our people. With his free hand, the janitor waves at the president, but I'm the only one who catches it. And the sight of that silhouette cleaning up after the other silhouettes chills me like a blast of air conditioning. And I lag after the entourage until the president turns around and notices I'm a few paces behind him. I can see him talking at me, but I don't quite hear it over the electronic dissonance of 250 video slot machines chiming at once. So he repeats himself. You okay, cuz? You got that look on your face. Don't worry about my face, I say, more testily than I mean to. He pauses for a minute. Takes too long to think of something smart to say. But he's got nothing. He keeps moving down the aisle. I think I'll stop there.
It's so nice to hear that in your voice after having read it.
I just heard the audiobook.
Really?
It's really strange to hear your book in audiobook with like an actual actor. But yeah, it's
Sound
like
good?
another book. It's like somebody else wrote the book.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's all right. Because I know the book that I wrote.
It was what I finished the book just recently, and it's fascinating to me, and I don't want to give anything away, but how much now hearing the beginning again, hearing the opening again, like how very much of the end is encoded right there in the beginning. I feel like it's very interesting to hear that opening a second time and think about where these relationships are going to go between Mac and Mitch, and things are going to get messy from this point on. And I don't know, just having some knowledge of that, it hits differently, as they say.
Yes, it's going to get messy. That's part of the book. Yeah, it's going to get very messy.
I thought I would just say, just to kind of ground things, a couple of things about the book, I guess. I just firstly, this was such a beautiful and really immersive read for me. I feel like I lived with this book for a couple of weeks, and I really got to be with these characters and be with this place, the Passage Rouge Nation. And it was just so vivid for me and a really beautiful experience. So thanks for writing it, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
It's a big, rich novel full of characters, troubled personal history, like old feuds, old loves, politics, tribal politics, And it all comes to bear on this intense 5-day period over which the book is set leading up to this election for tribal president of the Passage Rouge Nation. Our narrator is Mitch Caddo, who's running the campaign for the incumbent candidate, Mac Beck. Mitch grew up in the area, went away to law school, worked in D.C. a while, winds up back in Passage Rouge, where he meets up with his old childhood friend, Mac, encourages him to run for tribal president, helps steer him to victory. And now Mac is running for re-election, finding himself with a real serious challenge from a new candidate, Gloria Hawkins, someone with real national name recognition as a progressive activist and politician. And as Mitch and Mac feel the election slipping away from them, they get desperate. And as things sort of turn ugly, spiral out of control, there were points where, the way in which it spiraled out of control felt to me at times like worthy of a Coen Brothers script, but also with this real emotional core, because the way I found myself caring about these characters, Mitch in particular, it's like you really want it to work out well for Mitch. You want Mitch to find a place to be, which seems to be one of the big things he's missing in his life, Yeah. So I don't know. It was a great read, and I'm excited for all of you to get to read it. With something that's such a big, undertaking as this book, I just always am curious, just at a kind of basic level, how did you conceive of this? Where did it come from? What's the germ of Big Chief for you in your as a writer? How long did you work on it?
Well, I've always been writing around the subject, tribal elections, tribal politics. I watch what happens on the reservation where my people are from, and it's a mess. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there, and it's all very personal. It's all very small. It's a small town election with very big consequences. So I always felt like that was going to be something that would yield a lot of drama, but I never really had the form of it, I think. And I don't know what it was. It might seem obvious, but I did start writing this in 2016. And, right around the time that the whole political circus was kind of ramping up, I think at the time, it wasn't serious. Seriously bad, you could see that something was happening, but there was still some sort of comical element to it, a very absurd element, and then it became our reality. Yay. Wonderful. We continue to deal with it. But I mean, I don't think that was really the impetus for the whole thing, but it was definitely happening at the time. And then, I think that I've been writing for a while, and I was trying to find, what is my subject? What is the thing that I'm always writing about? I'm always writing about the sense of belongingness, or not, or feeling disconnected from a community or from a people, even though you have these very deep roots. And I think at some point it became clear, this was the easiest way into that. How do you make that into a narrative? Because it's just a subject, right? It's just a thing that you feel, just these very abstract sort of feelings. But to put it into a narrative, well, an election works as a narrative. It's got the natural beats. And as soon as I started to pay attention to that, I think that things started to fall into place. But it took a while. Here we are, 9 years later. But it's here, so I'm not gonna grumble about it too much.
I just found that really fascinating about the search for the form and the frame, and so you find the election as the frame, but then you found your way towards. So the novel has this really propulsive structure where it takes place in, as I said, in the 5 days leading up to the election. And we have these kind of big sections marked by day. And I wonder, was that something that you just came quickly, or did you have to find your way toward that too, the day thing?
I feel like everything in this book had to be found. I don't think anything just sort of, came out of the sky. It just, I had to work through this a few times. And the way that it is right now, as you will read it, is very different from what I handed my agent a few years ago. The form that I was looking at was a sort of homage to the book All the King's Men, by Robert Penn Warren. It's a book about politics, but not really about politics. I almost knocked down the table. I wanted it to be, like a very point-to-point homage, very obvious, very, like this is, the indigenous version of All the King's Men. But what came out was very, very long. It was 450 pages, and my agent was like, this needs to be shorter by about a quarter. And I was like, I had to go back and cut most of this book. And what happened was I had this long arc, this long rise and fall story, this narrative. And I was really happy with it. I was really impressed with myself. And then, I give it to my agent, and she's like, it's a little bit baggy in the middle. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can see that. But what I did have was this framing story that was taking place in a present day time, over the course of this election. And what I realized was that was the story. And it was a very humbling moment, because that was like half of the book that ended up, in the cut pile. But that really was where the urgency of it was. That's where the, like the propulsiveness. And then once that happened, like you said, like the end just sort of takes on its own momentum. It's very fast. It felt like writing it felt very fast. So fast that I kind of worried about it. But then, I was getting good response from that, and they're like, oh yeah, this is great. This is great. Like, okay.
That's very interesting to me. The parts of a project that come really, really quickly. So you're just so you'd already had kind of multiple drafts of this thing, and then it was like the form falls into place, and then you get to the end, and it's like it just kind of tumbles out.
There are things in that I took months to craft that ended up on the floor, and then the stuff like this that just sort of like in a couple of days, like really fast, and that's the stuff that ended up staying.
That's amazing. That's just endlessly fascinating to me, stories about creativity like that. So, but I should probably ask you about the book itself, like with the content, I guess.
The content. I did write a book. Yes,
I'm a big process guy. I like process. I thought a lot as I read the book about representations of strength and toughness. So when Mac and Mitch are kids, Mac is Mitch's childhood protector. He helps him deal with bullies, with beatings. Later on, Mitch goes to law school. He works in D.C. He comes back to Passage Rouge. He runs Mac's campaign, becomes Mac's fixer. And then then Mitch becomes the one who is kind of protecting Mac in various ways, but with a much different, set of tools, I suppose you could say. Yeah. I'm curious, is this something you were thinking about as you were writing this book? Strength, representations of strength, and power.
I think it was a natural outcropping of it, just that in that, it was always a book about power. Mm-hmm. It was always a book about agency. Like, how do you, start with a character, Mitch, who is disconnected from that community and feels apart from it and feels like people are keeping him from it. And is moving through the world with that chip on his shoulder. Mm-hmm. It's powerlessness, and it's this, the perception of powerlessness. And the story is about him trying to gain some of that power. So I think that it's just like a natural sort of thing where we're like, comparing types of power, political power, the power to, be mobile between different, communities or settings, that sort of thing. It felt like it was just sort of, just naturally all part of the power stuff.
Yeah, that kind of like in betweenness is such a big concern of the novel too. Like so many of the novel's characters are caught between things, but in between identities. So as you said, Mitch has been away from Passage Rouge, returning. There's a character in the book who calls him over and over again a J. Crew Indian. And the issue of tribal disenrollment is at the heart of the politics in the book. I read a beautiful rave review that you got in the LA Review of Books today. Which are a beautiful review, in that review appeared the line, what it means to properly appear and be recognized as authentically Native, are at the heart of Big Chief's depiction of Native American life. Does that line resonate with you? Is something that was on your mind, yeah.
The question of authenticity.
Mhm.
Yes, definitely. Right. That who decides these things. If you're enrolled, what does it mean to be enrolled? What does it mean to subscribe to this system? This corrupt system of like blood quantum, and like this is determining whether you belong to a community or if you're allowed to be in this community. That was definitely on my mind. I think that I was thinking a lot about the outward symbols, the iconography, the visuals, the pictures of like what is a native person, right? Who's indigenous, and it really is, as I've come to understand it, as I've come to my own, peace with my relationship to my family and my community, is that it is a very personal thing, and it doesn't read, it doesn't read like visually necessarily, but it's funny how everybody in this book is really concerned with how it looks, right? That's what the cover's about. I always want to talk about my cover. I like the cover.
It's a beautiful cover. Gorgeous cover.
But I'd always, I'm an indigenous writer, and I was always suspicious that somebody would be putting a feather on my book cover. But like this, but I gotta make sure that I do it deliberately, ironically, like in a way that's ironically, and the people in the book are, in the beginning anyway, very, very concerned with like just these outward shows, right? Like how do you represent visually, so that somebody can look at you and just know, right? And that's Mitch is very, very concerned about that, because he doesn't feel like he reads that way. So yeah, I forgot the question.
No, that was great. I mean, the big chief is Max Carr, the
Yes.
presidential ride.
Yes.
I love that.
A Ford F-350.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mac loves that thing.
He does love that thing. People love their trucks. Yeah. It's the symbol of power. I think that the limousine has kind of gone out of fashion as the symbol of the ride of power. I think the SUV or the pickup truck is definitely more of the time, I think. So yeah, he's definitely picked that as a visual representation of his presence, right?
He's Mac Beck is one of the just sort of most kind of vividly rendered, most memorable characters I feel like I've encountered in a book in a while. And so you said you started writing in 2016, so maybe there's a certain parallel between Mac and a certain other political figure at the national level.
I think that it's hard not to make that comparison, but I don't think that was really, because in 2016, again, this book was very, very different.
Sure.
It was very different characters, and there was a Mac character kind of in the background, just sort of hanging out there, and just kind of being, he was a little goofy. He was just a little bit, like I don't know if I really took him seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, it just sort of like my attention kept on going to this guy, and he just, because of his gravitational wake, just demanded more attention and more pages. And eventually, it was like, I don't know, like I started it off, and Buzz Carlisle is the tribal president. He's like the old time machine kind of guy. And that's who they were running against. But I was not satisfied with that. There was something kind of conventional about that narrative. So I started looking into it, and there's this Mac guy who just demands this attention, and he's just got a voice, and he just needs to be on the stage, and took over.
It's fascinating to hear you say that, Mac started off as kind of goofy, because he does. It's interesting in that in him becoming maybe the sort of focal point of the book. Like Mac is goofy. Like he jokes constantly. He's sarcastic constantly. And it's interesting that actually it winds up becoming pretty dark. There are very serious things that Mac kind of can or won't take seriously, or that there are times where he's unable to muster a kind of appropriate response to various heavy situations.
He's a little bit of a Fredo Corleone sort of character, honestly, and then got more serious throughout. But Yeah.
He is this like kind of symbol with the truck and the flat brim hat. He's got this kind of very calculated kind of appearance, and Mitch is keenly aware of that, and Mitch is like employing that appearance, for these political ends. And I don't know if this is a question you can answer, but do you think that Mac doesn't quite see himself as playing a character? I don't think playing a role, but does Mac see himself as all image? I don't know.
That's a great question. And maybe something, that you determine as a reader, but I think so. I mean, I honestly, I think that he does have a certain self-awareness to his image, to, the character he's trying to communicate, that he does pick these things. Mitch doesn't pick his clothes. It's like him.
Right.
This is all Mac. So, he's got to have some awareness of it, but he's got his blind spots, I think. So
he's a guy with a lot of pain in his past,
pain.
I mean, a lot of characters in this book do. And we talked about the issue of kind of otherness and belonging and identity, but there's so much related to those ideas with regard to family in the book too. The book centers pretty heavily on two adopted people. Mitch has lost his mother in a car accident. We learned that on the first page of the book, I think. So there is a lot of sense. Mitch also is sort of kind of treated like family at various points of his life by the Beck family, the family that Mac was raised in. Now, as the book begins, he's kind of on the outs with them for various reasons. A lot of them having to do, of course, with the election. And so it winds up being a book about people who are seeking. Well, I mean, maybe seeking is the wrong word. Their relationship to it changes, I guess. But people who are kind of outside of a kind of warm, close family relationship, and maybe whose actions are informed by that need for. Mac at various points, for example, is he's in search of a brother. It's suggested in Mitch later in the novel. He's in search of a kind of surrogate father figure. He's rejected his adopted father, Joe Beck. I'm just curious, what your draw is as a writer, where that comes from in you as a writer, that dynamic, how you wind up there.
That's a great question. I was thinking about that in terms of the craft of it, right? That you start with a story, you start with a setting, and again, like that, I was really drawn to the setting, and I knew that I wanted this book to be there. But again, the process, was about finding the people. And I think that, I knew these characters, and I know them in a way, they're composites of people that I know, they're also very fictional, right? Gotta make sure we say that. Lest anybody think that they're in the book. But when you have them all kind of assembled, as a writer, I'm looking at it I have a whole bunch of needy people. These are all people that are lacking something very essential. Mitch is somebody that's lacking that family, right? He loses his family very early on. Like his mother has died in a tragic accident, and his father has abandoned the family. They're all looking for something. They're all looking, and Mitch especially is looking for that spiritual center that he is missing. He's missing this thing. And in the beginning of the book, he has replaced that spiritual center with this quest for power. And it's not working out. I mean, that's the shape of the book, right? So I guess I just as a writer, I'm looking at it what is it that these people need? What are these people looking for? What is it that they're yearning for? And I try to fasten on that as soon as I can, because that's what really drives that emotional narrative.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't actually talked, I don't think, about the setting of the book really too much about Passage Rouge. I mean, what was important to you, to get down onto the page and to get into the book with regard to this place?
I wanted it to feel somewhat cut off, somewhat I don't know, petri dish of democracy. I think the democracy in on the small scale that has a lot of import, a lot of um, uh, bigger consequences. And I think it was just kind of creating this sort of self-contained nation, a country, a sovereign entity, and also, yeah, that sense of maybe isolation, and that would give my characters like the opportunity to, I guess, reach the depths. It takes place in northern Wisconsin in the cold, so I'm like, oh yeah, all right, that's gonna cause some misery, some soul searching, I suppose. But yeah, I guess that's how I was looking at it.
No, I love that. It makes me think of something that I took a class with Julie Oringer at NYU, and she always talked about as a craft, technique, a craft thing. Send your characters to hell, sort of thing that she always said. So I tell that to
That's very stark. I don't know.
No, I tell it to my students now, but it strikes me that the way that you're kind of framing it is kind of more redemptive too. I like the framing of it. What do these characters need,
Yeah,
and then also what about the setting? What about the shape of the book, the kind of arena of the book is going to kind of push them towards something, toward discovery, to something closer toward those needs, I suppose.
I feel like that's something like that you might do in your stories. That you set up this, I don't know, like traps or
Traps, yeah, for sure.
Just how do I make them mad and how do I make them sad and miserable, because you want to see them how they get out to the other side, but it does feel a little bit sadistic when I say it out loud.
Well, this is kind of maybe a broad question, or a sort of kind of general writerly question, but then like what comes first for you, the trap or the people?
It's got to be the people, right? Because then I don't know. I don't like where this is going. Yeah. First you find out what they really, really want, and then you take it away from them, and then you find out what they're really scared of, and then you put that in front of them too. Because I don't feel like that's how it is, but maybe it's like an unconscious sort of thing. Because you want to write a story that is gripping, right? That has some sort of emotional stakes, and it is kind of that equation where you're like, where are their weaknesses? Where are their voids? What are they lacking? And the story is going to exacerbate that, so that when they get to the other end of it, if they do, that you feel elated when you get there, right?
Yeah. That's just what I was thinking. What a fascinating thing about narrative forms, then in a book like this, right, you can proceed that way. Like, take these little. There was a line in a John Updike book about writing. He says, first you whittle the puppets, then you move them around. So it's like you construct this kind of these people in this trap, and you kind of you push these people first away from what they need, and then a little bit back closer toward it, and then if you could take the reader along on that journey, and you can produce this kind of beautiful euphoric experience by by that push and pull. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to me.
Well, now everybody's got this impression that that's who I am now. Just make problems for made-up people.
Well, you're a writer.
Yeah, Yeah, I go to my office and disappear for hours on end. My wife will tell you, and this is what I do there. I just but I mean, it's more than that. I mean, because again, this is nothing if you don't have compassion for the characters. If you have just contempt for the characters, I think that readers really, they react to that. We don't want to be in that mindset, I think. And one thing that I was maybe worried about as I was writing is that I start with a very cynical character. The character is very cynical. And I was worried maybe too cynical, right? To the point of no return, I think. And one of the challenges, over the many drafts was finding, where are we, where's our uplift, I think, where is he going to find some sort of peace, where is he going to drop some of the cynicism? And I hope it's there.
You found it. You found the uplift. It's there. It's there.
All right, I'll take your word
for it. I can confirm.
That makes me feel good.
Do you miss the book now that it's gone from you? Do you miss the characters? Do you miss Passage Rouge?
Maybe a little bit. I do have something going now. I will not talk about it because I'm superstitious in that sense. But I think my head is sort of moving into this other world where, this is, like you said, it's like distant, because I turned in the final draft. Oh, when was that? It's been a few months, clearly. But I think that once that was gone, I think that I was ready to leave Passage Rouge, I guess.
Yeah. It's like a state, right? We were talking a minute ago about you used the phrase dream state to describe the feeling that you get when you're writing. I don't know. I'm curious. Can I just ask you to talk about that? Like, do you feel that way, that you enter a kind of it's like a little bit of a trance state kind of thing to write a book like this when you're working on it?
I feel like you kind of have to, because it's making stuff up, right? And it's not real. It seems so self-evident, but I've heard people talk about it, like the writing process, and it sounds like mythologizing a little bit, but it is like this self-hypnosis that you are concentrating on it enough that you can experience this and not just like write it and describe it. So I think that people do all sorts of things to get to that point, but. I don't know what it is for me. Maybe sensory deprivation.
Exactly.
Sitting in the office and just looking at the page.
I wrote this down as my for fun question, and I think maybe fun. We have time for it. It just dovetails with what you're saying. There's so much in the novel, in the early part of the novel, especially before it really kind of spirals about the nature of work. Mitch is isolated by virtue of his work. He's obsessed with his work, with the campaign. The work changes him. Near the beginning of the novel, Mitch misses a Thanksgiving dinner to be with Mac, to be at the campaign headquarters.
The sad Thanksgiving dinner in the casino. Yeah.
I have this thing where I can't help but read into other people's books. Like, are you writing about writing there? Is that what it's like to be a writer? Is that to the extent that we meet this character who's chained to his work, who's pulled away from family and rhythms of ordinary life from it? Is there a comment about the work of writing a novel in there?
Well, now I just feel exposed. I don't recall. I refuse to answer the question. I think it's my constitutional right to refuse that. Maybe. I don't know. It's all unconscious. It's all there's a possibility, but not consciously.
I saw myself as my point.
Good. Okay.
I think it's time for questions. Do we have questions?
The Q&A.
Sterling.
Oh boy.
Is it true that Monica's nickname for you is Big Cheese?
No. Thanks, Sterling.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I love the cover, by the way.
I was very happy with the cover.
Good job on that. So your friends, and your family who live on a different reservation, did they know that you're writing this book, and did they anticipate that they may see themselves in this book? And how did they feel about this process?
Yes to all of that. Yes, they're very egerly anticipating reading the book and finding who's who.
And what they are lacking.
Yeah, I got a.
You must have thought about that.
Well, I did, yes. I have a very uncomfortable reading coming up at the end of the week. Yeah, all the family's going to be there, and all the uncles are looking for themselves in the characters, and everybody's a composite. So there's not really any one-to-one sort of thing, but my uncle works for the tribe, and he has some years of experience watching this, and participating in it, and he's always been saying, "Well, John, there's a good book in this," and I'm like, "You're right, Uncle." And I never wanted to admit to him, but now I have to. So. Now I'll have to do it in person, yeah. But yes, there is some anticipation there. Yes.
If your book could, thinking on a grand scale, ignite some type of national conversation or highlight to what would you want that theme to be, or what would you hope for that conversation to look like?
I'm supposed to be repeating the questions for the internet audience, and I forgot.
Oh.
So the questions about if were the book to ignite a national conversation, you know, what would you want that to look like?
You know, I'm very aware that it's a book about politics and that people are going to be coming to the book, you know, with that mindset. And I think my hope is that it's not just about this one moment that we are currently in. And, you know, like I said before, you know, it's hard not to make the parallels, you know, I mean, like conscious or unconscious. But I think the main thing was that, you know, I have a character who has, again, replaced his spiritual core with, you know, something that's not, right, with politics and power. And I think that's the kind of discourse that we're in these days, that, you know, that broadly, you know, if I can make a sweeping statement, you know, that the way that a lot of people talk about politics these days is, you know, somewhat tinged, you know, in religion, right? You know, like the apocalyptic sort of, you know, oh, if the other people win, we're all going to die, you know, sort of, you know, all or nothing sort of thing. And I think maybe that there's that, you know, maybe that our politics, you know, kind of come from some sort of moral or spiritual void at the moment. That's a very lofty want for this book, I suppose, but I think that's probably what I was thinking by the time that, you know, you get to the final drafts, like, oh yeah, this is what's happening. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Hi.
Hey.
I loved hearing that you are someone who's regularly at Green Apple supporting other authors, and I know we're here celebrating your book, but I feel like we can celebrate multiple books.
Can we?
Multiple authors. So I'm just wondering, besides Zach's Beautiful Days, of course, what is something you've read recently that took your breath away, and what was it specifically about it that took your breath away?
Oh, specifics.
Question is what have you read that's taken your breath away, and what was it about it that took your breath away?
There's a lot of books that are coming out like this week. It seems like there was a big backlog of you know, people didn't want to release books last year, like at the very end of last year, for some reason. I don't know, national election. So there have been quite a few, and one of them, Kyle Edwards, his book Small Ceremonies just came out last week. And I was able to read that in the ARC form, and just he's just amazing. It's polyphonic, you know. It's like, you know, it's a whole community, and just to have that sort of breadth in that book, you know, I really admire that. And what else is coming out? Let's see, Kate Folk. Her book is called Sky Daddy, and that sounds wild. I don't know if you know anything about it, but it's about a woman who's trying to fall in love with an airplane. And you know, I haven't read that one yet, but I'm, you know, really looking forward to it because I've read her short stories before, and she's an amazing writer. So those are the two that just came out this week. So I don't have time to talk about more, but Audition by Katie Kitamura. I heard that one's really, really good. Plan to get that. So.
Me too.
Yeah.
You referenced a couple times that this is an election that has kind of big repercussions. Can you tell us more about these big repercussions?
Questions about big repercussions.
Big repercussions, yes. I think in general that it's a small town election, right? You know, that scale, that size. So, you know, we're talking about hundreds or maybe, you know, into the thousands of votes, you know. But, you know, it is a reservation, and it is a government that, you know, works so closely with, or, you know, maybe not functionally, but, you know, closely with the federal and state governments. There's a casino that is a driver of the economy. So we're talking about millions of dollars going through this thing. And, you know, they're stewards of the land, right? You know, they're preserving a culture, preserving a language. So I think that, you know, that's what was really fascinating about it to me, was that It is very small, but we have it's just laden with all of these other things on top of it that just exacerbate these bad feelings, and just that these are very personal elections. These are very long-standing family, family versus family, grudges and that sort of thing. But I think what I meant by that again, was that you have a nation, right? You have a sovereign entity that you don't have, like if you're a mayor of a small town, that sort of thing.
Hey John, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
My question is, so much of Native representation is sort of like comes via like the long history of stereotypes. And I'm interested to talk about how you negotiated, how much to lean into the sort of the truth of those stereotypes, and how much you felt like you could push against them. Is that kind of question of representation was a challenge for you as you wrote the book?
It's a really good question, and a very complex one, I feel like. And I think that when I was going through this, when I was conceiving the book, I was very aware of these sorts of questions. And I think in the first drafts, I was trying to throw everything into it. Just like every theme that I could come up with, but I found like if I'm focusing on something, the true subject of it, I think it became a little bit clearer, and to me it's just that belongingness, and referencing maybe my own feelings of belongingness, again like that relationship that I have to my culture, my language, is a very personal one. And I think that once I started to concentrate on that within Mitch, right, that he's dealing with something very similar, I think that kind of cleared things up a little bit, because you can get lost in the weeds. There's a lot to talk about, but yeah. Sterling.
Another question.
Yes.
You talked a little bit about this, but I'm always interested in this. Can you talk about how you navigated writing about an Indian community? It's one of the most fraught things I can think of that an American writer deals with.
Mm-hmm.
There are any number of fears that you had to have had going into that, and I know that just because every Indian writer I know has those fears.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, you're the only one, John. And I'm just I'm interested in hearing you talk about that and how hard it is, because it's something that I think that frankly most other American writers just don't know about it at all.
Yeah.
Also, which uncle is most likely to fight you when you go home?
Oh, which uncle? Ed or Ted?
Does somebody have your back when you go back there?
I would hope so. I don't know. My uncle Ed might. Yeah. Hi, Uncle Ed. It's very much on the mind as you're reading, writing the whole thing, and I think in one way, I just didn't think about it. I tried not to think about it because I felt like it was self-censoring a little bit. It was holding me back a little bit. If I was afraid of, getting something wrong, or misrepresenting something, I run into those as roadblocks. But if I just went ahead with it and just said, let's see what happens, and that's a very scary way of writing, I find, because down the road, eventually you're going to have to go back to the community and, maybe justify some of these things. I was careful about not sharing things that I feel like some people don't want to be shared. I was careful about not representing knowledge that, I don't necessarily have. And I was, just going off of, basically what I know. and being careful in that. And then I also made up a reservation too. So it's like, you know, that just makes it. You know, it's not your, you know, like if people from Flambeau say, "Hey, what's up?" It's fiction. It's made up, you know, because it is, you know, and you know, like a lot of the stuff in the book, you know, there is some sort of real world analog, but you know, they're from the different tribes, you know, different, you know, governments. It's sort of a mishmash, a composite. So yeah, I think willful ignorance, I think, probably carried me through a good amount of it.
But even the choice to like make up a reservation, like that's a major choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's still in Anishinaabe, yeah.
Did you start there, or did you have to go through a process to get to the point where you're like, I can't write about the real thing. I'm not going to use real names. Like I'm going to do this other thing. How like did you start there, or did you have to like go get there as you wrote the book?
I think I started there. I think that I felt, you know, I felt like I didn't want, you know, people from this place or this place to like look at it like, you know, I'm coming in and, you know, just writing about something that, you know, I don't know if I can write about it, right? You know, if I have those doubts. So I always felt like that, you know, it would have to be made up, you know, maybe for, you know, like legal reasons too. But the culture is, you know, where I come from, you know, I'm an Anishinaabe. So, you know, that it was always going to be that. So kind of like a hybrid, a mix there. But yeah, I started from that point.
We have time for one more question. Yeah.
Hey, John, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Did you feel any conflict between writing for your community versus writing for people outside your community to teach them about your community?
That's a really big question. It's a the 5 minutes before the reading question, right? Yeah, definitely. You know that there's always that tension, and you know, again, you know, like it's in this cover of this book, or you know, just that this awareness that you know the audience for the book. You know, I intended it for, you know, general. You know, I'm not writing necessarily for, you know, my community or the people that, you know, people I know, or a general community at all. Like it's supposed to be both. And I felt like, you know, throughout the writing process that there was, you know, I could feel that there were some things that, you know, like the editors wanted to know, you know, like in terms of like language, like if I use Anishinaabe, you know, like they wanted translations like right afterwards, and I had to fight them a little bit on that one. Like you can tell what this is in context, right? So yeah, I think I felt like that, but you know, I felt it was also important to you know, make a stand on those sorts of things. And you know, just go with the way that I wrote it, right? So yeah, it was a little bit of back and forth on things like that. But we've reached a point where I feel pretty satisfied with how it's gone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for coming out. So good to see everybody. Congratulations, guys. Thank you.
Can we give one more hand for Jon Hickey? And congratulations. I'm so excited for you. And the book is like so entertaining, and I'm not gonna, I mean, you just listen to them talk about it, so anything I could say would not do any justice. It doesn't matter. But 2 thumbs up from this bookseller. I will be brief and just let you know that we have copies of books by both of our authors at the front register. You can find them there. John, I'm going to have you here signing them, if that is okay. So find them there. You can line up right here to get them signed. If you have any other questions, do let me know. If not, we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.